She didn't fall. She was pushed. And as Claire Whitmore tumbled down those marble stairs, arms wrapped around her own stomach, protecting the child inside her instead of saving herself, every person standing above her on that landing already knew what they had done. Two of the most powerful families in America watched in silence. Not one of them moved. Nathaniel Ashcroft hit his knees beside her before she stopped sliding. His hands were shaking. His shirt was wet with her blood. And when he looked up at the faces staring down at him, his mother, his father, the woman they had always intended him to marry, something behind his eyes went completely, permanently dark. This is a story about what a man destroys when the only thing he has ever truly loved is taken from him. If you've made it this far, stay until the end. Hit the like button and drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The rooftop bar at the Aldenmere Hotel sat 53 floors above Midtown Manhattan, and on a Tuesday night in late October it was full of the kind of people who had never once in their adult lives checked a price before ordering. The skyline spread in every direction like something assembled for maximum effect. Towers of glass and steel catching the last amber light of a day that was dying slowly, beautifully, without any awareness that it owed anyone anything. Nathaniel Ashcroft had been standing at the north railing for 11 minutes before he noticed her. He wasn't there to notice anyone. He was there because his assistant had booked the Aldenmere's penthouse suite for a 3-day run of back-to-back investment meetings, and because the rooftop bar was the only place in the building where his phone lost signal with enough consistency that he had a plausible reason to not answer it. His father had called 4 times that day. His mother, twice. The family's chief legal officer once, at 7:15 in the morning, which was the kind of call that meant something had already gone wrong before most people had finished their coffee. He was drinking scotch he didn't particularly want and watching the Hudson River go dark in the distance when the woman at the far end of the bar said, clearly and without embarrassment, to the bartender, "I'm sorry, is there any way you could make this with less ice? It's diluting too fast and I can't finish it quickly enough for it to matter." The bartender looked at her the way bartenders at places like the Aldenmere looked at people who said things like that. Patient, barely. She didn't notice. Or she noticed and didn't care, which was a different thing entirely. Nathaniel looked at her for the first time. She had dark hair pulled back in a way that suggested it had started the day more organized than it currently was. She was wearing a blazer over a shirt that had a small ink stain near the left cuff. She had a battered leather notebook open on the bar beside her drink, and she was reading something in it with the focused, unconscious frown of someone who was thinking about something other than where she was. She did not look like she belonged at the Aldenmere rooftop bar. Neither, in any way that mattered, did he. He moved down the bar without deciding to. He was aware that this was something he almost never did. Approach strangers, initiate anything that wasn't structured in advance by someone on his team. His world did not work that way. His world worked through intermediaries, through scheduled introductions, through rooms full of people who already knew who he was before he walked in and had already decided how to behave around him. He had not, in recent memory, started a conversation with someone who had no idea they were talking to him. "The ice thing is a real problem in places like this," he said. She looked up from the notebook. She had brown eyes, direct and slightly tired, the eyes of someone who'd been awake since early and was going to be awake for a while yet. "They fill the glass with ice before they fill it with anything else," she said, "which makes sense economically, but it means you're paying $22 for something that's mostly water within 4 minutes. You timed it. I time things." She looked at him without the particular kind of appraisal he was used to. The fast scan that people did when they were trying to place him, calculate his net worth from his watch and his shoes, figure out what he was worth talking to. She looked at him the way she'd looked at the bartender, straightforward, present, faintly amused. "You're not here for the view." "What makes you say that?" "You've been facing north for the last 10 minutes. The view's better south. You can see the whole lower island." He hadn't realized she'd noticed him. He wasn't sure how he felt about that. "What are you working on?" She glanced down at the notebook, then back up. "Healthcare reimbursement structures under the current federal framework, specifically the way out-of-network billing interacts with emergency care mandates in states that haven't adopted the secondary payer protocol." There was a pause. "That's not what I expected you to say." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Something about the conference downstairs. Everyone up here is either from the finance conference or the pharmaceutical summit." "I'm from the pharmaceutical summit," she said. which is exactly why I'm up here instead of down there. If I have to hear one more panel about patient-centered innovation from a company that fought a price transparency bill for 6 consecutive legislative sessions, I'm going to say something I can't take back in a professional context. He laughed. Came out differently than laughing usually did for him, without any of the performance of it, without the social calibration. Just a sound that happened because something was actually funny. "Claire Whitmore," she said, and held out her hand. "Nathaniel," he said, and shook it and waited. She didn't do anything with the name. She didn't narrow her eyes or tilt her head or do the thing people did when they were searching their memory for context. She just nodded and picked up her drink and said, "Are you in finance or pharmaceuticals?" "Finance," he said. "Then you're part of the problem too." "Probably," he said. Yeah, they talked for 2 hours. He couldn't have accurately reconstructed the conversation afterward. It moved too fast and covered too much ground, jumping from healthcare policy to urban infrastructure to a disagreement about whether transparency laws created accountability or just created the appearance of accountability while the actual mechanism stayed hidden. She argued with precision and without deference, not because she was performing independence, but because she genuinely didn't seem to care whether he agreed with her. She was wrong about one thing, a specific point about secondary market dynamics that she was building an argument on top of. And when he pushed back with the actual numbers, she didn't get defensive. She said, "Okay, that changes the model. Let me recalculate." And pulled out her notebook and actually did it, sitting there at the bar, scratching out figures and rewriting the conclusion. He had never in his adult life met anyone who did that, who just admitted the premise was wrong and rebuilt the argument in real time without needing 20 minutes and a communications consultant. When she finally said she had to go, early morning, another panel, the specific suffering of conference schedules, she didn't linger. She closed the notebook, tucked it under her arm, told the bartender he had a thankless job done with admirable composure, and was almost at the elevator before she turned back. "The out-of-network billing thing," she said. "If you actually wanted to understand it, not from a policy brief, from someone who's tracked the actual human outcomes, there's a coffee place on 47th that opens at 6:30. They don't put ice in anything." He was there at 6:25. She arrived at 6:31 with the notebook already open, and they talked for 3 hours before either of them mentioned they had somewhere else to be. That was October. By December, it had become something neither of them had named yet, not because they were avoiding it, but because naming it would have meant slowing down long enough to have that particular conversation. And they were always moving, always in the middle of something. She had a sublet in Brooklyn, a third-floor walk-up that smelled like old radiator heat and the Ethiopian restaurant below it. He had a penthouse on Central Park West that he was almost never in. They met somewhere in between, in borrowed booths and late-night diners, and once on a bench in Riverside Park at 11 p.m. in 22-degree weather, because neither of them had wanted the evening to be over, and neither of them had said so out loud. She knew he had money. She wasn't naive. She knew the watch was worth more than her monthly rent, and that the car that sometimes dropped him off wasn't a car service. But she never asked about it in the way people asked about it, with that forward lean and that particular brightness in the eye. And when he tried once to take her to dinner somewhere that required a reservation made weeks in advance, she'd looked at the menu and said, "This is $40 for something described as deconstructed. I cannot do this. Can we go somewhere with actual portions?" They went to a diner on 9th Avenue. He ate an entire plate of scrambled eggs and hash browns and felt, obscurely, like he was getting away with something. What he hadn't told her, what he kept putting off, kept finding reasons to delay, was the full picture. Not just that he had money, but the specific nature of it. The name, the family, the structure of obligation and expectation that had been built around him since before he had the language to understand it. He had grown up as the single heir to Ashcroft Holdings, a conglomerate with fingers in private equity, commercial real estate, pharmaceutical distribution, and enough subsidiary companies that the full organizational chart required specialized software to render. His father, Douglas Ashcroft, was 71 and had never spent a single day of his professional life concerned with any outcome except the accumulation and preservation of family wealth. His mother, Eleanor, had been born into the Crane family, old money, older attitudes, and had married Douglas at 23 in a union that had been beneficial to both families and about as warm as a corporate merger, which is essentially what it was. And there was Victoria. Victoria Beaumont was the only child of Harrison Beaumont, whose company, Beaumont Global, had been intertwined with Ashcroft Holdings through a series of investment partnerships and cross-ownership arrangements for nearly 20 years. The arrangement between the families that Nathaniel would eventually marry Victoria had not been written into any contract. It didn't need to be. It was the kind of understanding that lived in the air at certain dinners, in the way his father spoke about long-term strategic alignment, in the way Victoria had looked at him since they were teenagers at the same fundraising galas, with the particular certainty of someone who has been told by the adults in her life that something belongs to her. Nathaniel had never agreed to it. He had also never refused it with enough force to make the refusal stick. He had spent years in the space between those two things, keeping enough distance from Victoria to make the situation ambiguous, close enough to his family's world to keep the arrangement technically alive. He was 34 years old, and he had been doing this for a long time, and he was very tired. He told Claire on a Thursday evening in January, sitting on her couch with the radiator ticking and the smell of the restaurant drifting up through the floorboards. He told her about Ashcroft Holdings, about his father and what the company was, about the scale of it. He watched her face while he said it, and she didn't go wide-eyed, and she didn't go still in that calculating way. She just listened. When he was done, she said, "Okay. Okay. I had some of it figured out already. The car. The way you talk about your father like he's a board you're trying to manage instead of a person." She looked at him steadily. "Is there more?" He told her about Victoria. There was a silence. "So there's a woman," Claire said, "who thinks she's going to marry you." "Her family thinks so. My family thinks so. Victoria." "Yes. I think she believes it. And you." "I've never asked for this. I've never agreed to it. Have you told them that?" He didn't answer right away. She watched him not answer, and her expression didn't change, but something behind it got very quiet. "Nathaniel, it's complicated." "I'm sure it is," she said. "Most things worth saying out loud are." He looked at her. The radiator ticked. Somewhere below them, something in the kitchen of the restaurant clattered. "I'm not going to marry Victoria Beaumont," he said. "I need you to understand that's not a negotiable part of this." "I need you to understand that saying it to me doesn't mean anything," she said, not unkindly. "You have to say it to them." "I know. Soon." "I know." She leaned back against the couch cushions. "This is a lot," she said. "I need to think." "I know." "Don't keep saying I know. It's making me feel like you're agreeing with me to manage me, and I can't tell if that's actually what's happening." "I'm not—" He stopped. He thought about it honestly. "I don't think that's what I'm doing." "Okay," she said. "I'll tell you if it starts to feel that way." That was what she did. She told him things directly, without the cushioning and the maneuvering that he had come to expect from every other relationship in his life. It was uncomfortable in a way that felt strangely like being awake, like going from a room where the temperature had been so carefully controlled for so long that you'd forgotten what actual weather felt like, and then stepping outside. He didn't leave that night. She didn't ask him to. They fell asleep on the couch with the television running something neither of them watched, and he woke up at 4 a.m. with her shoulder against his and the heat in the apartment finally working properly, actually warm for once, and he thought, whatever this is what I've been missing. Patat. He called his father the following Monday. It did not go well. Douglas Ashcroft listened to his son's statement, calm, measured, final. "I am not going to marry Victoria Beaumont, and I need you to communicate that to Harrison in whatever way you think is appropriate." With the silence of a man who had spent 50 years making high-stakes decisions and believed at a cellular level that every obstacle was a negotiation waiting to happen. "You're having a moment," his father said. "I'm not. You've been distracted this quarter. I've noticed it. Whatever this isn't a negotiation, Douglas." There was a pause. His father had not been called Douglas by anyone in his family in 20 years. Nathaniel had not planned to say it. It came out that way. "You'll come to dinner Thursday," his father said. "We'll talk about it." "There's nothing to talk about. I'm telling you where I stand." "Thursday," his father said, and ended the call. His mother called 20 minutes later. Eleanor Ashcroft communicated displeasure the way a certain kind of cold front moved, quietly, at altitude, in ways that only became clear when everything below it started icing over. "You upset your father," she said. "I told him the truth. You know what this alliance means. You've always known. I know what it means to the company. This family is the company, Nathaniel. That's not a metaphor." "I know that too," he said. "I've always known that. I just don't agree that it has to be." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Is there someone?" "Yes." Another pause. When his mother spoke again, her voice had shifted. Not warm, but precise in a different way. The way a doctor's voice shifts when the test results confirm what they suspected. "Who is she?" "Her name is Claire Whitmore. She's a healthcare policy analyst." "Does she know who you are?" "She knows exactly who I am." "That's not what I asked," his mother said, and hung up. February came in cold and dense with gray. Claire had a project deadline that consumed 2 weeks. A federal policy brief that she worked on with the focused ferocity of someone who actually believed, that the document she was writing could change the way a government spent money, and that this mattered for real people in real hospital rooms. She worked past midnight most nights and ate badly and drank too much coffee, and called Nathaniel at irregular hours to read him sections she wasn't sure about, asking for his reaction not because he was a healthcare expert, but because he would tell her if something was confusing instead of saying it wasn't. He was at a hotel in Chicago for 4 days, back-to-back meetings with people he didn't particularly want to meet, and he listened to her read policy language over the phone and gave her honest reactions. And she pushed back on his reactions, and they argued about it, productively. And he thought about how long it had been since he'd had an argument that was actually productive and couldn't count back far enough to remember. On the first Thursday of March, she called him. It was 7 in the morning. He was already awake. He was always awake by 5:30, had been since his 20s, some wiring in him that couldn't rest past dawn. He was at his kitchen counter with coffee when her name appeared on the screen. He answered. She said his name once, just his name, and the tone of it was different from anything he'd heard from her before. Not frightened. Claire did not frighten easily, but stripped of its usual steadiness, like something underneath the steadiness had shifted. "What's wrong?" he said. "Nothing's wrong," she said. Nothing's wrong. I need to tell you something." The pause that followed was brief but complete, the kind of pause that has weight. "I'm pregnant." He held the phone. The kitchen was very quiet. His coffee was steaming. "How long?" he said. 8 weeks, roughly. "I went to the doctor yesterday. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you for 3 days. You should have called me 3 days ago." "I know. I needed to think first." "Think about what?" "About what I wanted, before I involved you in it." He set down the coffee. "Claire, what do you want?" There was a pause, and in it he could hear her breathing. That particular quality of breath that meant she was being careful with what she said next, choosing precisely. "I want the baby," she said. "I know that's complicated. I know it's a lot, and I'm not asking you to—" "Stop," he said. "Nathaniel." "I said stop. I'm coming over." "You don't have to come over right now. It's 7 in the morning, Stuart." "I know what time it is. I'll be there in 40 minutes. He was there in 35. He still had on the shirt he'd slept in. He'd stopped to get coffee from a place on the corner, 2 cups, and he knocked on her door, and when she opened it, he handed her the coffee and stepped inside and looked at her. Really looked at her, standing in her living room in oversized sweatpants and a university sweatshirt with ink on the cuff, the same ink stain that had been on her blazer the night they met. Different clothes, same stain, and he said, with the particular simplicity of someone who had thought about exactly one thing for the last 35 minutes, "I'm not going anywhere." She looked at him. Her eyes were tired. The kind of tired that had been there for 3 days, not one night. "You can't just say that," she said. "I know. You have to understand what that means. In the context of everything you told me about your family, I understand exactly what it means. I know what they're going to do," he said. "I've known them my whole life. I have a good idea. And I'm not going anywhere," he said again. "That's not the part that's under discussion." She looked at him for a long time. The radiator ticked. The Ethiopian restaurant below them wasn't open yet, too early, and the building was very quiet. Okay, she said. Okay. You should know I'm not easy, she said. I'm going to have opinions about everything. I'm going to fight you on things. I know. I like that about you. I'm serious. I know you are. I like that about you too. She almost smiled. Then something behind her eyes settled. The way things settle when a decision has been made and the making of it is complete. Okay, she said again, softly. Then okay, he said. What Nathaniel had not told her, what he had not told anyone, was that he had been preparing for this in some form for years. Not the pregnancy specifically, not Claire specifically, but the moment of departure from everything his family had built around him. He had started moving assets quietly when he was 29. Careful, unhurried, technically above board at every step, but structured in ways that his father's legal team would not see clearly until it was too late to reverse. The centerpiece was a charitable medical foundation, the Cross Ashcroft Medical Initiative, named in part for his oldest friend Benjamin Cross, the only person outside of Claire who knew the full scope of what Nathaniel had been constructing. The foundation had been accumulating for 5 years, the equity instruments that would eventually represent Nathaniel's controlling interest in Ashcroft Holdings. The mechanism was clean and entirely legal, a transfer of Nathaniel's voting shares to the foundation board, of which he was a founding member, would strip his family of the control they had assumed was permanent, and it would trigger, depending on how quickly his father responded, a cascade of reporting requirements that the company's offshore structures were not designed to survive in the open air. He hadn't done it yet. He'd been waiting, not for permission, for the moment when it was truly necessary, and for the certainty that when he moved, he was moving toward something and not just away. He had that certainty now. He called Benjamin Cross from the car on the way home from Claire's apartment. Cross picked up on the second ring. He was already at the hospital. It was barely 8 in the morning, and Cross had been arriving at 7 since his residency and never stopped. I need a timeline, Nathaniel said. A pause. Cross knew what timeline. They had talked about this in the abstract for 3 years. How close? Cross said. I'm not sure, but it's starting. They're going to move against her. How do you know? Because I know my family. Nathaniel watched the city move past the car window. The streets were gray and wet from overnight rain, people moving fast with their heads down, the particular rhythm of the city and cold weather. My mother knows about her. Once my father talks to Harrison Beaumont. When did your mother find out? Last month. She hasn't acted yet. She's been watching me, waiting to see if I was serious. Are you? Ben. Right, stupid question. A pause. Cross-thinking, running the probabilities the way he ran them in a clinical context. Methodical, without panic. What do you need from me? On standby. When I move the shares, the foundation needs its medical director on record and accessible. I'm always accessible. And if something happens, Nathaniel paused. He didn't finish the sentence. Cross finished it for him. If something happens to her, I'm the first call you make. Yes, Nathaniel. Cross's voice was steady, but underneath it there was the specific weight of a man who had known someone long enough to know what they were actually afraid of. Don't let it get to that. I'm trying not to, Nathaniel said. He stared out the window. The city slid past, indifferent and continuous, 100,000 stories in motion simultaneously with no knowledge of each other. He thought about the way she'd stood in her doorway with the coffee he'd brought her, not smiling yet, not all the way, but with that thing in her eyes that was hers alone, that direct, unperformed steadiness, and felt the particular terror of someone who has found, for the first time, a thing they cannot afford to lose. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again. Same number. He answered. Mr. Ashcroft? A woman's voice, professional, without inflection. My name is Donna Reyes. I'm calling from the office of Harrison Beaumont. Mr. Beaumont would like to schedule a conversation with you at your earliest convenience. He says it's a matter of some urgency. A pause. He asked me to convey that it concerns a mutual interest both your families would prefer to keep private. Nathaniel looked out the window. Tell Mr. Beaumont I'll be in touch, he said, and ended the call. The car moved north through the wet gray city. Somewhere in Brooklyn, Claire Whitmore was probably already at her desk with her notebook open, working, thinking, building something careful and important out of words and evidence and the belief that they could change something real in the world. He was going to protect her. He had already decided that. What he hadn't decided yet, what he was still building the nerve to do, was whether to tell her exactly how much danger they were both already in. That evening, his phone showed him something that answered the question for him. An email forwarded through a secure channel he used only for sensitive financial communications. No sender name, just an attachment. He opened it. It was a photograph, taken that morning. Claire leaving her building in Brooklyn, coffee cup in hand, the collar of her coat turned up against the cold. The angle was from across the street, at distance, with the kind of lens that wasn't typically used by anyone with benign intentions. Beneath the photograph, 3 words. She's been noticed. His hand was steady. He had trained himself to keep his hand steady. But something in the center of his chest went very cold, very fast, with the particular temperature of a decision that has already been made by someone who is not asking your permission. They had moved first, which meant he was already behind. He printed the photograph. He didn't know why exactly. There was something about having it on paper, physical, something he could hold and look at without a screen between him and it. He printed it at the office at 11:30 at night when the floor was empty, stood at the printer and watched it come out, and then stood there for a while longer just looking at it. Claire, leaving her building, not knowing. He put it in the inside pocket of his jacket and went home and didn't sleep. Papish. He called her at 7 the next morning and kept his voice level and told her he needed to see her that evening. She said she had a late meeting but could do 8 o'clock. He said 8 was fine. He spent the day making 2 phone calls he had been putting off for different reasons, and one that he hadn't planned to make at all. The first was to Marcus Hale, who ran the private security firm Nathaniel had used intermittently for corporate travel and had never once needed for anything personal. Hale was former federal, the kind of former federal that never became fully former. And he listened without interruption while Nathaniel described what he'd received and what he believed it meant. "How many people know about her?" Hale said. "My parents. Harrison Beaumont, presumably. Through my father. Victoria, probably. Probably isn't good enough. Either she knows or she doesn't. I don't have confirmation." "Get it." A pause. "Do you want coverage on her or just surveillance detection?" "Both." "She's going to notice." "I know. I'll tell her." "When?" "Tonight." Hale said he'd have a team in Brooklyn by that afternoon. Nathaniel gave him Claire's address and the cross streets and felt, hanging up the phone, the specific sickness of having allowed something to get to this point before acting. The second call was to his attorney, not the family's attorneys, his own, a woman named Diane Chu who had handled his personal financial structuring for 6 years and who knew in full the architecture of what he had been building. "How fast can we move the shares?" he said. A pause. Diane was precise, and she was not easily alarmed, but he could hear her recalibrating. "Define fast." "Weeks, not months." "Nathaniel, that kind of timeline, the filing requirements alone. What's the minimum legally defensible window?" Another pause. "Longer. 3 weeks if we front-load the documentation and file the foundation amendments in parallel. But your father will see the preliminary filings. There will be no... I know there won't be any surprise. That's fine. It's not fine. The moment he sees those filings, he will move to challenge the transfers through the family trust structure. We will be in litigation. He can challenge what he wants. The transfers are legal. He has had access to every financial statement for 6 years and chose not to read them carefully." Silence. "Diane, I'm thinking." "Think faster." She let out a breath. 3 weeks. I'll need everything from you by end of week. And Nathaniel, this is going to be very loud." "I know what it's going to be," he said. "Build the documents." The third call, the one he hadn't planned, was to Victoria Beaumont's personal cell phone. He had the number. He had never used it. She had given it to him at a charity function 3 years ago with the particular casual precision of someone who had rehearsed the gesture. She answered on the second ring. "Nathaniel." Her voice was warm in a way that had edges underneath it. "I was wondering when you'd call. I need to say something to you directly." "All right. What happened between our families, what was arranged without my agreement, is over." I am telling you personally, so there is no ambiguity. I am not going to marry you. That is not changing. A silence. Long enough that he thought for a moment she had put the phone down. I see, she said. Her voice had not changed temperature, which was its own kind of information. I wanted you to hear it from me. That's very considerate. A pause. Is this about the woman? This is about my life. Of course it is. Another pause. The warmth in her voice was gone now, not replaced by coldness exactly, but by something more precise. The sound of someone who has received a piece of information and is already processing what it means for a plan they have been running for a long time. Thank you for calling, Nathaniel. I appreciate the directness. She hung up. He sat with the dead phone in his hand and felt the specific chill of a conversation that had confirmed something he hadn't wanted confirmed. She had not argued. She had not pleaded. She had not done any of the things a person does when they are surprised. She had already known. And she had already decided something. Tish. He told Claire that night. All of it. The photograph. Hill's team in the neighborhood. The share transfer timeline. What he believed his family was capable of, and why. He sat on her couch and laid it out without softening it, watching her face while she processed it. She listened the way she always listened, completely, without interrupting. When he was done, she was quiet for a moment. How long have you been preparing to do this? She said. The shares, the foundation. 5 years? She looked at him. 5 years? Yes. Before you met me? Yes. So this isn't... She stopped. Started again. You're not doing this for me. I'm doing it now for you. I was building it for myself before. To get out. Of your family. Of the version of my life they had designed. She leaned back. Her hands were in her lap, very still. And the baby changes the timeline. The photograph changes the timeline. You being pregnant means they have more reason to move quickly. If there's a child, an heir, the calculus around the Beaumont arrangement shifts. I'm not a calculus problem. I know that. I'm also not... She stopped again, pressed her lips together. I'm not going to pretend I'm not scared, because I am. Someone followed me and photographed me outside my own building, and I didn't know. That's... She exhaled. That's a specific kind of violation. I know. Stop saying I know. Sorry. Don't apologize either, just... She pressed her fingers against her forehead. Just talk to me like I'm a person who is handling this. Because I am handling it. I just need you to not manage me while I do. You're the least manageable person I've ever met. Something shifted in her expression. Not a smile, not quite, but the precursor to one, the thing that happened in her eyes before her mouth got there. Okay, she said. What does your security person say? That we need to assume the photograph was a message, not an accident. That if they wanted to surveil you without your knowledge, they would have done it without sending me the image. So they wanted you to know they were watching her? Yes. To scare you into... what? Ending things. Probably. She was quiet, looking at the wall across from her, the one with the shelf of policy briefs and medical journals and 3 plants in varying states of survival. Then she looked back at him. I'm not going anywhere either, she said. I want to say that clearly. I'm not going to be pressured into disappearing. I know that. I mean it. Claire, I know you mean it. She looked at him a moment longer. Then she nodded, once, the way she nodded when a decision had been made and the making of it was complete. Tell your security person thank you, she said. And tell him I'd like a briefing on what specifically his people are doing, because I'm not comfortable with strangers surveilling my building without understanding the operational parameters. He almost smiled. I'll set that up. Good. She picked up her notebook from the coffee table, it was always within arm's reach, and opened it. Now, tell me about the foundation, how it works legally. I want to understand the structure. He told her. She took notes and asked questions that were better than the questions his attorney had asked, because she didn't have a lawyer's instinct to assume he already understood the risk. She asked him to explain things plainly and then push back when the plain explanation revealed assumptions she didn't share. At 9:30, she made tea and they sat in the kitchen and he walked her through the financial architecture he had spent 5 years building. This woman who was carrying his child in her third-floor walk-up, above an Ethiopian restaurant, and he thought, this is the most honest conversation I have ever had with another human being. It was also, he was aware, happening about 3 weeks too late. The first move came 11 days later. It was a Thursday morning, early, just after 7. Claire was walking from the subway to the coffee place on 47th. She still went, some mornings, out of habit and stubbornness, because she refused to let the awareness of being watched change the geography of her daily life, which was something Hale had argued with her about twice and lost. She was half a block from the corner when a black SUV ran the red light at the intersection ahead of her and mounted the curb. It happened very fast. The SUV clipped a newspaper rack, skidded, and came within 6 feet of the spot where she would have been standing if she hadn't paused to pull up her collar against the cold. She stood on the sidewalk and watched the SUV correct and accelerate away. A man nearby was already on his phone. A woman was asking if anyone was hurt. Claire looked at the space on the pavement between where she'd stopped and where the vehicle had been, 6 feet of cold concrete, and felt the particular quality of fear that arrives not when something happens, but in the moment after, when you understand that it almost did. She called Nathaniel before she called Hale. She wasn't sure why. She told him what happened in a flat voice, clinical, the voice she used when she was keeping herself very still on the inside because the alternative was not useful. He didn't say anything for a moment after she finished. "Where are you right now?" he said. "Same block." "I didn't move." "Don't move. Hale's people are... One of them should be within 2 blocks of you. Stay visible." "I'm standing on a public sidewalk in Midtown Manhattan. I'm visible." "Claire." "I'm okay," she said. "I'm calling because you need to know, not because I can't stand up." "I know you can stand up. I also need you to understand that this changes things for me," she said. Her voice was still flat, but something in it had shifted, a different quality underneath. I've been treating this like a problem we were managing at a reasonable pace. I don't think we're at a reasonable pace anymore." "No," he said. "We're not." "How close are the share transfers?" 2 weeks, maybe less if Diane pushes the documentation." "Push it," she said, already calling her. She looked at the street, the place where the SUV had been. A cab was honking at something a block over. The city had absorbed the incident completely in under 5 minutes, the way it absorbed everything, quickly, without ceremony, moving on. "Nathaniel." "Yeah." "They tried to kill me," she said. Not loudly, just clearly. A pause. "Yes," he said. "Okay," she said. "Then we don't wait anymore." But Tess, Hale pulled the SUV's plates within 4 hours. Clean registration, reported stolen from a lot in New Jersey 2 days prior. The vehicle itself was found abandoned in the Bronx that afternoon, wiped. No traffic camera had caught the driver's face at an angle worth anything. But Hale's team found something else. One of the surveillance detection operatives he'd stationed in Claire's Brooklyn neighborhood had been running background identification on any vehicle that appeared more than once in a 48-hour window. A gray sedan, unregistered to any address within 6 blocks, had been parked within sight of Claire's building on 4 separate days. Plates traced to a shell company, Meridian Consulting LLC, incorporated in Delaware, 2 years old, no employees on record, no revenue. Meridian Consulting's registered agent was a law firm in Midtown. The firm's client list was not public, but one of its senior partners had appeared on a panel 2 years prior with the general counsel of Ashcroft Holdings. "It's not proof," Hale said. "No," Nathaniel said, "but it's a structure. It's the way they work." He was in Hale's office, a spare functional room in a building in the West 30s that looked from the outside like an accounting firm. Hale was across the desk from him, a man in his mid-50s with the physical stillness of someone who had spent years in environments where moving without purpose got people hurt. "What do you want to do with this?" Hale said. "Keep building it. Document everything, every plate, every sighting, every transaction that can be traced." "That takes time." "I know." "How much time do you have?" Nathaniel thought about Claire, about the 6 feet of pavement, about the photograph, about the call from Beaumont's office and the sound of Victoria's voice when she said, "I see," and the particular absence of surprise in it. "Not much," he said. He left Hale's office and sat in the car for a few minutes before he told the driver to go. He pulled out his phone and opened a message thread he hadn't touched in 2 years. A private channel he had established with a contact at a financial investigative firm, the kind that specialized in tracing assets through structures designed to be untraceable. He typed 2 words, "Start running." Then he put the phone away and looked out the window and thought about his father. Douglas Ashcroft had built Ashcroft Holdings on the principle that power moved through information, that you never entered a room without knowing more about every other person in it than they knew about you, and that you maintained that advantage through patience, through the willingness to accumulate leverage slowly over years and deploy it only when you were absolutely certain. He had taught his son this, had drilled it into him through childhood dinners and board meeting observations and the occasional pointed demonstration of what happened to people who walked into a room underprepared. He had taught his son too well. The plagiarism allegation appeared on a Monday. A blog post, anonymous, on a site that had existed for less than a month, claiming that a federal policy brief submitted under Claire Whitmore's name in 2021 contained substantial sections lifted from unpublished research by another analyst. The post included side-by-side comparisons, numbered with specific page references. It looked rigorous. It looked like the kind of careful documentation that emerges from genuine academic concern. By noon, it had been picked up by 2 policy-focused media outlets. By 3 o'clock, Claire's supervisor at the nonprofit where she consulted had forwarded it to her with a message that said, in its careful institutional language, that they were sure there was an explanation and that they would need to discuss it at her earliest convenience, which meant, today, now, before this becomes a thing we have to manage. Claire called Nathaniel from outside the office. He could hear the street behind her. They fabricated a plagiarism allegation against my 2021 brief, she said, complete with fake documentation. It's professional. How bad? If I can't disprove it within the week, I lose the consulting contract, possibly others. A pause. It's well constructed. Someone who knows how these documents are structured built this. It's not a random smear. It's targeted to the specific work that established my credibility in this field. Can you disprove it? Yes. Flat. Certain. Every draft of that brief is time-stamped in the system with my edits. The version history goes back 18 months. If the material they're claiming I plagiarized was unpublished research, I can subpoena the alleged researcher's file metadata and show the dates don't line up. A pause. But that takes time. And in the meantime, the perception damage, I'll have someone on the digital forensics piece by tonight. I can handle the forensics piece. Claire, I said I can handle it. What I need from you is the timeline on the foundation transfers, because this is coordinated. The SUV and now this, within 2 weeks, they're not experimenting. They have a plan. He was quiet for a moment. Diane filed the preliminary amendments this morning. A pause. So your father knows. He knows something is moving. The full picture won't be clear to him for another 72 hours. What does he do when the full picture is clear? He fights, Nathaniel said. He fights everything and he doesn't stop. But the transfers are structured so that fighting them means exposing the offshore accounts. And exposing those accounts means federal exposure. Yes. She was quiet. He could hear her breathing, the sound of the street, a siren somewhere further east. They're going to escalate, she said. Yes. Before the transfer's complete. Yes. So we have 72 hours where I'm the most vulnerable I'm going to be. He didn't answer right away, hating the answer. Yes, he said. She didn't say anything for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had that quality he had come to recognize. The sound of someone who has already passed through the fear and come out the other side into something colder and more functional. Okay, she said. Then we make the most of 72 hours. She went back inside. He sat with the phone in his hand in the back of the car, watching the city move, and thought about Victoria Beaumont's voice on the phone. Thank you for calling. I appreciate the directness. He opened his phone and found the financial investigative firm's secure channel. They had sent a preliminary report. He scanned it. 3 pages of corporate structure diagrams, LLC registrations, numbered accounts. Meridian Consulting connected to 4 other shell entities. 2 of those entities shared a registered agent with a subsidiary of Beaumont Global. At the bottom of the report, a note. One of the connected entities, Harlow Medical Procurement, Inc., has purchasing records that include 2 transactions with a pharmaceutical research contractor. The contractor appears on no public registry. The procurement records are not consistent with any known legitimate use. He read the last line twice. Harlow Medical Procurement, Inc. has purchasing records that include 2 transactions with a pharmaceutical research contractor. He forwarded the report to Benjamin Cross with one line. Look at the last section. Tell me what that means in plain language. Cross replied in under 10 minutes, which meant he'd been at his desk. It means someone bought something that isn't sold through normal channels. Do you want me to make calls? Nathaniel typed back, yes. Whatever you can find out, fast. He put the phone in his pocket and looked out the window. The city was moving the way it always moved. Continuous, indifferent, 100,000 things happening simultaneously without knowledge of each other. Somewhere in that city, someone had purchased something through an untraceable entity connected to both his family and the Beaumonts. Something that didn't appear on any legitimate registry. And in 11 days, Claire Whitmore and their unborn child were going to be in the same room as people who had already tried once to put a vehicle through her on a Manhattan sidewalk. He had built a financial weapon 5 years in the making. He had lawyers and security operatives and enough documented evidence of corporate fraud to keep federal investigators occupied for a decade. He had a plan. What he did not have, what he was beginning to understand with a cold, specific clarity, was enough time. His phone rang. Cross. He answered. What did you find? Cross's voice was careful in the way clinical voices got careful when the information was bad. The contractor, he said. I ran it through 3 separate registries. It doesn't exist officially, but the compound profile in the procurement records, the quantities, the chemical descriptors, I know what that looks like, Nathaniel. A pause. I've seen it in research contexts, experimental synthetic compounds, the kind of thing that doesn't have an antidote on any standard formulary. The car was very quiet. You're telling me, Nathaniel said slowly, that they've already bought it. I'm telling you, someone connected to those entities purchased something that matches the profile. Yes. He closed his eyes, opened them. Ben. Yeah. Get whatever you need to treat it, whatever resources, whatever contacts. Start now. Nathaniel, I don't even know specifically what. Start now, he said again. Whatever you can identify from that profile, get it ready. Cross was quiet for a moment. Then, okay. And Ben. He stopped. He was looking at the buildings sliding past the window, the glass towers, the gray winter sky above them. Thank you for all of it. Don't thank me yet, Cross said, and his voice had the particular texture of someone who understood fully what they were being asked to do and had decided to do it anyway. Thank me when this is over. The call ended. Nathaniel sat with the phone in his lap and thought about Claire standing outside her office building, voice flat, processing at speed, saying, they tried to kill me, not as a breakdown, not as a cry, just as information that required an accurate name. He thought about the way she'd taught him to say the true thing plainly, the way she lived without the cushioning. He thought about what someone who had already planned a poisoning was going to do when they understood, in 72 hours, that the financial ground was shifting under their feet. He leaned forward and said to the driver, change of destination. I need to go to Brooklyn. Because whatever was coming, whatever the next 72 hours were going to bring, he was not going to be on the other side of a river from her when it arrived. The driver turned south. The city closed in around them, dense and loud and utterly indifferent, and Nathaniel Ashcroft sat very still in the back of the car and let himself understand, for the first time without any softening of it, what he was actually up against. Not a family dispute, not a corporate power struggle, not the kind of conflict that resolved itself through lawyers and press releases and strategic patience. 2 of the most powerful dynasties in America had decided that Claire Whitmore needed to. 2 of the most powerful dynasties in America had decided that Claire Whitmore needed to disappear. Not be frightened away, not be bought off, not be quietly discredited until she removed herself from the picture. Those had been the early moves, the SUV, the plagiarism smear, the surveillance photographs, and those moves had failed because they had underestimated what she was made of. Nathaniel understood now, sitting in the back of that car moving south toward Brooklyn, that the failure of the soft approaches had not discouraged anyone. It had simply escalated the approved solution. He had 72 hours before the foundation transfers became visible enough to trigger a response. He was going to spend every one of them next to her. Protect. He arrived at her building at 6:40 in the evening. She buzzed him up without asking who it was, which meant she'd seen him on the street camera. Hale had installed a small system on the building's exterior 2 weeks prior, discreet, a fisheye lens mounted above the mailboxes that fed to her phone. She was getting used to it. She hated that she was getting used to it. She was at her desk when he came in, laptop open, 3 browser windows running simultaneously. She had been working on the digital forensics of the plagiarism allegation herself. He could see the file metadata comparisons on the screen, columns of timestamps and hash values, the particular language of systems that recorded every keystroke with a date attached. She didn't look up immediately. "I found the source document," she said. "The one they're claiming you plagiarized." "Yes. It was created 11 days ago. The metadata is clean on the surface, but whoever built it used a word processing template that embeds a creation timestamp in the document properties. 11 days ago." She looked up. Her eyes were tired, but precise. "My 2021 brief was submitted in March of that year. You can't plagiarize a document that didn't exist until 11 days ago. Can you prove that to your organization?" "I already sent the file analysis to their legal team. They're reviewing it." She leaned back. "It's enough to kill the allegation, but it took me 8 hours to build the case, and I have 2 other projects that didn't get touched today." He sat on the couch. "I'm staying." She looked at him. "Okay. For the next few days, I'll sleep on the couch if—" "You don't have to sleep on the couch." She said it without sentiment, practical. "But I need you to understand something. If you're here, I can't. I need to be able to work. I can't have someone in the room managing my emotional state while I try to think. I won't do that. You have a tendency to watch me in a way that's meant to be reassuring but is actually distracting. I'll look at something else. I'm serious. So am I." He met her eyes. "I'm not here to protect your feelings, Claire. I'm here because someone purchased an experimental synthetic compound through entities connected to my family and the Beaumonts, and I am not going to be across a river from you right now." The room was quiet. She looked at him for a long moment. "Synthetic compound," she said. "Ben Cross identified it from procurement records. He doesn't know the specific formulation yet, but the profile is consistent with—" He paused, found the word. "With something that would be difficult to identify and treat quickly in a standard clinical setting." She held his gaze. Something moved through her expression. Not fear exactly, but the processing of fear, converting it into information that could be used. "They're planning to poison me," she said. "We don't know that for certain." "Nathaniel?" "Yes," he said. "That's what Ben thinks." She looked back at her laptop screen, looked at the timestamps, looked at the evidence of 11 days ago, the careful construction of a false paper trail designed to destroy what she had built over years of actual work. She closed the laptop. "Tell me everything Cross said," she said. "Exactly." He told her. She listened without interrupting, the way she always listened, and when he was done, she asked 3 questions in sequence. What chemical class did Cross identify from the profile? What was the likely delivery mechanism? And how quickly would standard hospital toxicology be able to identify it? He answered what he could and said he didn't know on the 3rd question. "I'll call Ben," she said. "You don't have to. I want to understand what I'm dealing with, medically." She was already picking up her phone. "I spent 6 years studying healthcare systems. I know what questions to ask." She called Cross. Nathaniel listened to half the conversation, her half mostly, and watched her face while she asked precise clinical questions about synthetic neurotoxin profiles, about the markers that would and wouldn't appear on a standard tox panel, about the window between exposure and irreversible damage. She took notes. She asked Cross to send her the procurement record file description so she could research the compound class herself. When she hung up, she sat for a moment with the notebook in her hand and said, quietly and without drama, "I'm not going to any events or public functions until this is over." "Good. But I'm also not stopping my work." "I know." "Say I know one more time and I'll throw this notebook at you." "Sorry," he said. She almost smiled. It was a small, exhausted thing. "Okay," she said. "Let's figure out the next 72 hours." The next morning, Nathaniel's phone showed him the preliminary response from his father's legal team. It was exactly what Diane had predicted. A motion to challenge the foundation transfers through the family trust structure, citing a technical provision in the original trust documentation that his father's attorneys claimed gave the trust board veto power over major asset dispositions. It was a weak argument. Diane said so in a voice that was as close to contemptuous as she allowed herself in professional contexts. The provision they were citing applied to real property, not equity instruments, and the distinction had been established through case law for 20 years. But it was going to cost time. Filing responses, scheduling hearings, the institutional drag of legal process all moving. At the speed legal process always moved when one side had enough money to slow everything down regardless of merit. How long? Nathaniel said. To defeat the motion? 4 to 6 weeks at minimum, possibly longer if they appeal the initial ruling. They'll appeal everything. Yes. What can we do to compress that? Diane paused. There is one option. If we can demonstrate that the trust itself was used as an instrument of a fraudulent scheme, if we can show that assets moved through the trust were products of illegal activity, then the trust provision becomes unenforceable. The challenge collapses. What kind of evidence would support that? Documentary, financial records showing specific transactions, offshore movements, tax misrepresentations, securities violations, the kind of thing that would be in the company's internal systems. I have some of that already, from the investigative firm. How much? Enough to start, not enough to be bulletproof. Then get more, Diane said. Whatever you have, get more. He ended the call and looked at his phone. The investigative firm had been running for 2 weeks. He had fragments, the shell entity connections, the Beaumont global subsidiary links, the procurement records. What he didn't have was the internal documentation, the actual transaction records from inside Ashcroft Holdings, the kind that lived in systems he no longer had access to since his departure from the company's operational structure 3 years prior. He sat with this for a while. Then he made a call he hadn't expected to make. A name he'd held in his contacts for 4 years without using, a number given to him at a dinner by a man who'd said, without context, "If you ever need something from inside a system you can't get into yourself, call this number and use my name." The man's name was Gerald Park. He was a semi-retired forensic accountant who had testified in 4 major federal cases and who had, Nathaniel had since learned, a secondary occupation that existed in the gray space between legitimate investigation and something that didn't have a clean legal category. Park answered on the 4th ring. Nathaniel used the name. There was a pause. 6 years since that dinner, Park said. What do you need? Internal financial records. Ashcroft Holdings. Specifically offshore transaction documentation and any internal communications referencing accounts in the Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, or the Isle of Man in the last 8 years. A pause. That's a significant ask. I know what it is. It's also your own family's company. Was, Nathaniel said. The transfers are in progress. Another pause. Longer. Timeline. I need whatever you can get in 72 hours. Park laughed. Not warmly. 72 hours. Or less. You understand what you're asking for in 72 hours costs differently than something with a normal timeline. I understand. And you understand that some of how I get things from inside closed systems. I understand what you do, Gerald. I need it done. A long pause. I'll call you in 12 hours with what I have, Park said, and disconnected. The gala invitation arrived that afternoon by courier. A heavy cream envelope, hand-addressed, the Beaumont Global Foundation seal embossed on the flap. An invitation to the annual Beaumont Ashcroft Charitable Gala, black tie, 4 days hence, at a venue in Midtown. The invitation was addressed to Nathaniel Ashcroft and guest. He stood in Claire's kitchen holding it and felt the particular cold of something designed to appear like a normal social event. He brought it to her. She read it. Set it on the counter. They want you there, she said. They want us there. The guest line. Yes? She looked at the envelope. This is a move. Yes. If you go without me, it reads as separation, like you've backed down. If you go with me, she stopped. They're planning something at the event. That's my read. She looked up. You're not thinking of going. I'm thinking that if I don't go, I lose ground. The transfers aren't complete. My father's legal challenge is active. If I disappear from the social landscape while this is in motion, it looks like you're afraid, she said. Yes. Are you? He thought about it honestly, the way she had taught him to think about things. I'm afraid of what happens if we go. I'm also afraid of what the optics of not going do to the legal situation. She was quiet for a moment, looking at the invitation, looking at the embossed seal, the careful formality of it, the pretense of occasion wrapped around something that was not a social event at all. I'm not hiding in this apartment, she said. Claire, I mean it. I understand what the risks are. I've understood them since the SUV, but if I modify my behavior in response to their intimidation, if I stop going to work and stop going to events and stop being visible, then they've already won something, and I won't give them that. She looked at him. If you think you need to go, I'll go with you. This is different from the SUV. This is a controlled environment with what? With people who've already bought a compound that isn't on a standard talks panel. Her voice was flat. I know what this is, Nathaniel. Then you know why I don't want you within 100 feet of either family. And I know why I won't let them dictate where I go. She held his gaze. We go together, with Hale's people, with Cross on standby, with your documentation already in the hands of people who will move on it if something happens to us that night. He looked at her for a long moment. The kitchen was warm. The radiator was doing its uneven, clanking best. Somewhere below them, the restaurant was starting its prep for the dinner service, the sound of it coming up through the floor. Low voices, the clatter of prep work, the smell of spices beginning to drift. I need you to understand something, he said. If something goes wrong, then Cross has everything he needs and Hale has everything he needs, and your attorney has everything she needs, Claire said. You told me you've been building this for 5 years. You told me the documents exist, the evidence exists, the financial counterstrike is ready. I'm asking you to trust what you built. He said nothing. Do you trust it? She said. Yes. Then we go. Gerald Park called back in 9 hours instead of 12. He had documents. Not everything, not the full internal archive, but enough. Transaction records from 3 offshore accounts, internal email threads referencing account movements, a memo from Ashcroft Holdings CFO to Douglas Ashcroft dated 4 years prior that discussed, in language that was careful but not careful enough, the methodology for moving profits through the Luxembourg structure before they appeared on any reportable balance sheet. Nathaniel read everything, forwarded the core documents to Diane, called her immediately after. Is it enough? He said. She was quiet for a moment reading. He could hear the sound of her scrolling, the small sounds of a lawyer processing information quickly and precisely. The CFO memo alone, she said, is significant. Combined with the offshore transaction records, yes. This defeats the trust challenge. More than that, this is federal exposure. This isn't civil litigation territory anymore. How fast can you move on it? I can have the fraud documentation filed with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit by morning. But Nathaniel, once I do that, the clock changes completely. This stops being a legal dispute between family members and becomes a federal investigation. There is no taking it back. I know that. Your father will be under investigation by tomorrow evening. I know. Your mother. She made her choices, he said. File it. A pause. He could hear Diane breathing, the breath of someone who was also making a choice, who was also stepping through a door that wouldn't reopen in the other direction. Filing in the morning, she said. Get some sleep. He didn't sleep. He sat in Claire's living room while she slept. He had insisted. She had resisted. They had negotiated it down to a compromise where she slept and he stayed awake. And he read through the documents again in the quiet apartment, the city noise coming up from the street below, the radiator ticking, the knowledge of what tomorrow would bring settling into him like temperature. At 2 a.m, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, 6 words. You should have stayed in your lane. He looked at it for a long time. Then he typed back, also 6 words. I built a longer lane. He put the phone face down and sat in the dark and thought about the gala in 4 days, and the compound Cross hadn't been able to fully identify and the 6 feet of pavement on a midtown sidewalk, and the way Claire had said they tried to kill me. Just information, just a fact that required a name. He thought about his father, about dinners at the family compound in Connecticut, the long table, the silences that had texture to them, the specific education of growing up in a house where love was conditional on performance and warmth was something that happened to other families. He had not hated his father. He had tried, for a long time, to understand him, to find the logic inside the coldness, the architecture of a man who genuinely believed that the accumulation of power was not just a strategy, but a purpose. He understood it now, completely, from the outside. And from the outside, it looked like nothing so much as fear. A lifetime of fear dressed in expensive clothing, armored in corporate structure, performing itself as strength so successfully that even the man inside it had forgotten what was actually underneath. He was not afraid in the same way. He was afraid of specific things, real things. The compound, the gala, the 72 hours, the 6 feet of pavement, concrete fears with names and dimensions. That, he thought, was the difference. But the morning of the gala, Cross called early. "I have more on the compound," he said. "I've been working through the chemical descriptor profile with a contact at a research hospital. She recognized the class." A pause. "It's a synthetic cardiotoxin. Experimental. The research trials were suspended 2 years ago because of..." He stopped. "Because of what?" "Because of the failure rate," Cross said. "In the trials. It's fast-acting in small doses. The cardiac markers it produces mimic a natural arrhythmia event. Standard ER protocol for arrhythmia wouldn't address the underlying mechanism. By the time someone identified it as toxic in origin," he stopped again. The silence was complete. "Ben," Nathaniel said. "I have a treatment protocol," Cross said. "My contact helped me build it. It's specific and it works in the research data, but it requires... The window for effective treatment after exposure is narrow, very narrow, under an hour." "How narrow?" 40 minutes, maybe 45 if the dose is on the lower end. Nathaniel sat with this. 40 minutes. From exposure to either treatment or the alternative. 40 minutes in a ballroom surrounded by 500 people and the 2 families who had authorized a woman's murder and dressed it up as a social event. "You'll be there tonight," Nathaniel said. It was not a question. "I'll be in the building," Cross said. "I've already arranged a medical liaison role through the event's emergency services contractor. It's legitimate, it's on file, and I'll have the treatment protocol ready. And if something happens, you call me immediately and do not wait for the venue's medical staff. Get me to her as fast as physically possible and let me work." 40 minutes, Nathaniel said. 40 minutes, Cross confirmed. He ended the call and sat very still. He thought about the foundation transfers, still 72 hours from completion. He thought about Diane's files landing in a federal inbox tomorrow morning. He thought about the documents, the evidence, the years of careful construction, all of it real, all of it solid, all of it exactly what he had built it to be. And then he thought about 40 minutes, about a ballroom, about Victoria Beaumont knowing, with the specific certainty of someone who had already authorized 2 failed attempts, that this was her last window before the legal ground collapsed completely beneath her. He got up, walked to the bedroom door, opened it quietly. Claire was awake. She was lying on her back looking at the ceiling, one hand resting flat on her stomach the way it had started to do unconsciously. The new habit of a woman who was aware, always, of what she was carrying. She turned her head and looked at him. "Cross found the compound," he said. She held his gaze, said nothing. "It's a cardiotoxin, 40-minute treatment window after exposure." He said it plainly, the way she had taught him. "If they use it tonight, I have 40 minutes to get you to Ben before it kills me," she said. "Yes." She looked at him. The room was gray with early morning light. Outside, the city was starting its day, the first sounds of it, a truck somewhere, a siren far away, the particular ambient hum of 8 million lives in motion. "We're still going," she said. "Claire, we're still going." She sat up. Her voice was quiet, but it had the specific quality of a decision that is not a decision anymore, that has moved past the place where it can be revisited. Because if we don't go, they win tonight without even having to do anything. And everything you've built, everything we've built, means nothing if we run from a room. She looked at him with that direct, unperformed steadiness that had been the first thing he'd noticed about her on a hotel rooftop in October. I trust Ben, I trust Hale, and I trust what you built. He looked at her for a long moment. She was 31 years old and 8 weeks pregnant, and she was the most uncomplicated form of courage he had ever encountered. Not fearless, not reckless, but clear in the way people are clear when they have looked at the true shape of something and decided what it means. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. She got up, walked to the bathroom. He heard the water running. He stood in the doorway and understood, with a completeness that was almost physical, what was at stake tonight. Not the company, not the transfers, not the federal cases or the trust challenges, or the decades of accumulated corporate corruption finally being walked into a federal building on a thumb drive. Her. And the child. And the 40 minutes that stood between those two things, and the 40 minutes that stood between those two things and everything that mattered. He was going to make sure those 40 minutes never had to be used. But he was also, for the first time in 5 years of careful, patient, methodical construction, going to be ready for the possibility that they would. The Meridian Grand on 57th Street had been the venue for the Beaumont Ashcroft Charitable Gala for 11 consecutive years. Nathaniel had attended 7 of them. He knew the layout the way you knew the layout of a place you had walked through enough times while thinking about something else. The main ballroom on the 3rd floor, the marble staircase from the lobby, the east corridor that connected the ballroom to the smaller reception rooms, the service entrance at the back of the building that the catering staff used and that Hale had already walked twice that afternoon. Hale had 4 people inside the building before the first guest arrived. 2 in event staff uniforms, 1 as a guest with legitimate credentials, 1 stationed near the service entrance. Cross had checked in with the venue's emergency medical liaison at 5 o'clock and had a position near the east corridor, close enough to the ballroom to reach Claire within 90 seconds of a call. Nathaniel had reviewed all of this in the car on the way. Claire sat beside him in a dark green dress that she had borrowed from a colleague because she had refused to let him buy her anything for the occasion, and had then spent 20 minutes the night before on the phone with the colleague explaining the situation in terms precise enough that the colleague had immediately said yes and also offered to testify if needed. The dress fit her well. She was wearing her hair up. She had the notebook in her clutch. A small one, a concession to the formality of the evening. Because she never went anywhere without something to write on. She was looking out the window, not at him, at the city. "Ben's in position," Nathaniel said. "I know, you told me. Hale's team is..." "Nathaniel." She turned and looked at him. "I know. I have read every brief, every position map, every protocol. I understand the setup." She held his gaze. "Now stop briefing me and let me be in this moment for another 4 minutes before we walk into that building." He stopped talking, looked at her profile as she turned back to the window, the city lights moving across her face. 4 minutes. He gave her 4 minutes. The lobby of the Meridian Grand was white marble and chandelier light. The particular warmth of an expensive room in winter, the sound of 500 people in formal wear producing a specific kind of noise, low, layered, self-conscious. The sound of people performing ease they didn't entirely feel. A string quartet somewhere near the staircase. Waitstaff moving with trays of champagne. They walked in together. He felt the room register them. Not all at once, gradually, table by table, conversation by conversation, the subtle ripple of attention that moved through a room like this when something entered it that required recalculation. He was used to rooms registering his presence. He was not used to what followed, the specific quality of the attention, sharpened by something that went beyond social calibration. These people knew. Not the details, but enough. The Ashcroft heir here, with a woman who was not Victoria Beaumont, at an event hosted by both families. The math of it was simple, and everyone in the room was doing it. Claire didn't look at anyone. She looked straight ahead, her hand in the crook of his arm, her posture the same as it was when she was reading policy briefs, upright, present, wasting nothing. He saw his mother first. Eleanor Ashcroft was near the bar on the left side of the room, in conversation with 2 women Nathaniel recognized from the foundation circuit. She saw him at the same moment he saw her. Her expression didn't change. In 34 years, he had never seen his mother's expression change in a public setting. She excused herself from the conversation with 2 words and began moving toward them. "Your mother," Claire said under her breath. "I see her. Do you want me to—" "Stay with me." Eleanor reached them. She was 62, with the posture of a woman who had been told since childhood that the way you held your body was a statement, and who had believed it. She looked at Claire with the particular gaze she used for things she found beneath direct acknowledgement, assessing, clinical, not unkind in a personal way, because personal would have implied that the other person registered as an individual. "Nathaniel," she said. "Mother." She looked at Claire. "Miss Whitmore?" "Mrs. Ashcroft," Claire said. A silence. 2 seconds that had the weight of 10. "I had hoped you would come to your senses before tonight," Eleanor said to her son. Not to Claire, to him. "I'm exactly as sensible as I've ever been," he said. "Your father wants to speak with you, before the dinner announcement. There's nothing he can say to me tonight that requires a private conversation." Eleanor's eyes moved to Claire again. The same gaze. "This is not a situation that resolves simply," she said. Still to Nathaniel, as if Claire were furniture, as if she were a variable in an equation rather than a person standing 3 feet away. "You've started processes that you don't fully understand the consequences of." "I understand them completely," he said. "That's why I started them." Eleanor looked at him for a moment. Something moved behind her expression. Not quite emotion, more the awareness of it, the ghost of something that had been there once and had been managed into a shape that was no longer recognizable as feeling. "You look like your grandfather," she said. "He was stubborn, too. He died without resolving half of what he started." She walked away. Claire let out a breath beside him, slow, controlled. "She's terrifying," she said quietly. "She's afraid," he said. "She's been afraid her whole life." Claire looked at him. "You believe that?" "Yes." "Okay," she said. "Okay, where's your father?" He scanned the room. "Not here yet." "And Victoria?" He found her across the room near the windows, in a white dress, a champagne flute in one hand. She was in conversation with a man he didn't recognize, but she was not looking at the man. She was looking at Nathaniel, directly, without pretense. He held her gaze. She didn't look away. There was nothing in her expression that he could name as a specific emotion. It was too composed for that, too controlled, but underneath the control there was something that had been there since he'd known her, since they were teenagers at galas like this one, a kind of focused, absolute certainty that functioned like a wall between her and any reality she hadn't chosen. He looked away first, not from fear, from the understanding that nothing he would see in her face tonight was going to help him. "She's at 9 o'clock, he said to Claire. "I know, I saw her." "Don't—" "I'm not going near her." Claire took a glass of water from a passing tray. "Not champagne. Water. I'm also not pretending she isn't in the room." The dinner bell rang. 500 people began the choreography of finding their seats. Their table was near the center of the room, which meant it was also near the main pathways to every exit. Hale had arranged this specifically. Around them were 6 other guests, 2 couples from the policy world whom Nathaniel knew professionally, a journalist whose name he recognized from financial reporting, and one person he didn't recognize at all, a man in his late 50s who had arrived at the table before them and who was introduced as a representative of one of the foundation's corporate sponsors. The man's name was given as Richard Aldous. He shook Nathaniel's hand with the particular handshake of someone who was used to rooms like this, firm, brief, without lingering. He looked at Claire with a standard social smile and said she was lovely. Something in the back of Nathaniel's mind registered the man's presence and filed it without yet knowing why. The dinner moved through its courses. Around them, the room performed its function: conversation, networking, the theater of philanthropy dressed in black tie. Nathaniel ate without tasting and watched the room and felt Claire's hand find his once under the table, briefly, the pressure of it, not needing reassurance, just marking his location, the physical fact of where he was. He pressed back. She let go. His phone, on silent in his jacket pocket, buzzed twice. He checked it under the table. Hale. Victoria moved toward East Corridor. Came back. She went toward service area twice in the last 20 minutes. He typed back, Tracker. Hale. Already am. Something's wrong with one of my people, Bob. East side. Lost contact 3 minutes ago. He went still. Typed. Which one? Hale. Chen. Event staff uniform. He went toward the service corridor and stopped responding. Nathaniel put the phone away, kept his face neutral, leaned slightly toward Claire and said, under the sound of the room, voice very low, "One of Hale's people lost contact. East corridor." She didn't look at him. Continued a sentence she'd been saying to the woman on her other side, finished it, then turned as if to pick up her water glass and said, equally low, "Are we moving?" "Not yet. Finish the course." "Where's Ben?" "East corridor, 80 feet from us." She picked up the water glass. Drank. Set it down. "Okay." He watched the room, watched Victoria's table. She was back in her seat now, in conversation, the white dress catching the chandelier light. Watched the east corridor opening, watched the service staff moving through the room with the next course. His phone buzzed again. He didn't check it. He could feel it buzzing, and he waited until the server who had just arrived at their table had finished and moved on before he looked. Not Hale this time. Cross. A single line. "The man at your table. Aldous. He is not a sponsor representative. His name is on a shell company registration linked to Harlow Medical Procurement." The buzzing of the phone had a different quality now. Not data. Warning. He looked at Richard Aldous. The man was in conversation with the journalist, gesturing with his fork, laughing at something. He had the particular ease of someone who was very good at performing ease. His right hand, Nathaniel noticed now, watching carefully, watching the specific choreography of the man's movements. His right hand had been at or near the table's water and wine glasses on Claire's side more than once in the last 20 minutes. He had not registered it as significant until this moment. He looked at Claire's water glass. He looked at it for one full second. Then he said, quietly and clearly, and with the specific tone of someone giving an instruction that is not optional, "Don't touch your glass." She heard it. She didn't look at him, and she didn't look at the glass. Her hands, which had been moving toward it, redirected to her napkin in one fluid, unhurried motion that would have looked to anyone watching like a completely natural gesture. Under the table, he typed to Hale, "Man at my table. Aldous. Shell company linked to Harlow Medical. He may have accessed Claire's glass. I need you now." He put the phone down and looked at Richard Aldous, and Richard Aldous, perhaps sensing the specific quality of the gaze, looked back at him. They held eye contact for 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, something passed between them. Not words, not threat. Just the mutual recognition of two people who now both knew exactly what was happening. Aldous set down his fork, placed his napkin on the table, began to rise. "Excuse me," Nathaniel said to the table, and stood at the same moment, and the way he moved, fast, deliberate, not running, but not the movement of someone who is excusing himself to find the bathroom, made the woman beside him go slightly still. Aldous was moving toward the east corridor. Nathaniel followed him. He caught him at the entrance to the corridor, grabbed his arm, turned him, put him against the wall in a movement that was controlled and entirely silent. Aldous was heavier than he looked. He didn't fight. He looked at Nathaniel with the professional calm of someone who had assessed the situation and made a calculation. "The glass," Nathaniel said. His voice was very quiet. Aldous said nothing. "Did you put something in her glass?" Still nothing. The man's eyes were steady, the calculation still running behind them. Nathaniel's hand tightened on his arm. "Talk to me right now, or I break this arm in this corridor and explain it to whoever arrives as a medical emergency." Aldous looked at him for one more second. Then, with the specific resignation of someone who has been caught in a plan that has already completed its function. "The glass she used." "Yes." Everything in Nathaniel's chest went cold and still. "How long ago?" 8 minutes. He let go of Aldous' arm and was moving before the man finished speaking, back through the corridor entrance, back into the ballroom, phone already in his hand, cross already ringing, already through the tables, already seeing Claire from across the room, still at the table, in conversation, appearing normal, and for one terrible second he thought maybe she hadn't drunk from it, maybe, and then he saw her hand go to her chest, just once. A small gesture. like something had startled her from the inside. He was at the table in 15 seconds. He went to her side and put his hand on her shoulder, and she looked up at him, and there was something in her eyes. The first thing he'd seen in her eyes in 6 months that was not completely controlled. Not fear, something more physical than fear. Confusion. The body registering something it didn't understand yet. "Ben," he said into the phone. "Now, now." He was already getting her out of the chair. "I'm fine," she said. Her voice was steady but slightly different from her normal voice. What's happening?" "The water glass," he said. 8 minutes ago." She understood immediately. He watched her process it. The specific, rapid recalibration of a person who has been told something catastrophic and is deciding in real time to be useful rather than frightened. "Okay," she said. "Okay, where's Ben? Coming?" He had her arm moving her toward the east corridor. "Can you walk?" "Yes." Then, "Nathaniel." "I know." "The baby." He couldn't speak for a second. The word landed somewhere below his ribs and stayed there. He kept moving. "Ben has a protocol," he said. "It works. He tested it." 32 minutes, she said, not panicking, calculating. "If it was 8 minutes ago, I have 32 minutes?" "You have more than that. The dose." "You don't know the dose." She was still walking. Her hand was gripping his arm with more force than usual. The first physical sign of anything wrong, that grip, tighter than it should have been. "What do you know about the formulation?" "Cardiotoxin, synthetic, mimics arrhythmia. Delivery mechanism." "Liquid, oral," she nodded. "Processing. A medical mind working the problem while the body underneath it was beginning to carry something it hadn't agreed to. Absorption rate through the GI tract gives us more time than direct. Maybe 45 minutes from ingestion to acute phase. Maybe more. 32 minutes from now, he said. Ben will be there. Cross met them at the east corridor. He had a bag. Not a large one, discreet. The kind of bag that looked like a personal item rather than medical equipment. He looked at Claire, and his face did the specific thing the faces of very good doctors do when they are doing rapid assessment. Everything became information. Everything became data, and the emotion of the moment went somewhere behind a door that could be reopened later when the work was done. "Tell me what you feel," he said. "Slight pressure, central chest. Came on about 3 minutes ago. No pain yet. Rate?" She put 2 fingers to her own wrist. "Elevated. Maybe 110. Regular." "Good. Regular is good." He was already opening the bag. "We need to move. The venue medical room. I have access and I have what I need in this bag. Can you walk fast?" "Yes." They moved. Down the east corridor, a left turn, past the service area, through a door marked staff, into the utilitarian back-of-house hallway that existed behind every expensive venue, concrete floors, fluorescent light, the decompression chamber between the performance of the event and the machinery that ran it. Nathaniel's phone was ringing. He looked at it. "Hale." He answered. "Aldous is gone," Hale said. "I had 2 people on him and he's gone. I don't know how—" "Forget Aldous. Claire's been dosed. We're with Cross in the staff corridor heading to medical." A beat. "What do you need?" "Lock down the building, nobody leaves, and find Victoria Beaumont." "She left the ballroom 6 minutes ago." Nathaniel stopped walking. Cross and Claire were 2 steps ahead of him. "Where?" "We don't know. She went toward the staircase and—" "Find her." He started moving again. "Find her now." The medical room was at the end of the corridor. A small, clean space maintained for event emergencies. 2 cots. A defibrillator. A basic supply cabinet. Cross had it unlocked before they reached it. He had Claire on the cot in under 30 seconds. Bag open on the second cot. Hands moving with the compact precision of someone who had spent 20 years making fast decisions in small rooms. Claire was watching him work. Her hand was on her stomach. The same position as this morning, flat, present, the unconscious habit of 2 months. "The baby," she said to Cross. "The treatment protocol is safe for pregnancy," he said. "I confirmed that specifically before tonight. You have my word on that." "You tested it." "The research data." "Benjamin." Her voice was very steady. "Did you personally confirm that this treatment protocol is safe for a fetus at 8 weeks?" Cross met her eyes. Yes, he said. I spent 4 hours on the phone with a perinatologist yesterday afternoon confirming exactly that. You have my word. She held his gaze for one more second, then nodded. Okay, tell me what you're giving me. He told her. She listened, asked 2 questions about mechanism and 1 about dosing. He answered all 3. She nodded again. Do it, she said. He worked. The room was very quiet except for the sound of him working. Small sounds, clinical, deliberate. Nathaniel stood near the door and watched Claire's face, and she was looking at the ceiling and her jaw was tight, the muscles along it visible, which was the only physical expression of what she was managing. Her hand was still flat on her stomach. His phone buzzed. Hail. Victoria Beaumont located. Marble staircase off the main lobby. She's not alone. She has 2 people with her. Private security, not ours. She's heading toward the ballroom level. And then 30 seconds later, a second message from a number he recognized as one of the investigative firm's secure channels. Not a message. A file attachment. A large one. He opened it. It took 10 seconds to load. It was everything. Not the fragments he'd had before. The full internal archive. Transaction records, CFO communications, board minutes, offshore account structures, wire transfer confirmations, internal legal memos discussing exposure management, emails between his father and Harrison Beaumont spanning 9 years that discussed, in language that was sometimes blunt and sometimes carefully coded but always clear in its intent, the methodology of moving money through structures designed to never appear on any document that a regulator could access. Gerald Park had gotten everything. Nathaniel stood in the medical room doorway, looking at his phone, and felt the weight of what was in his hand. Years. His father's entire construction, every carefully arranged piece of a life built on the premise that power was the only honest currency and that its acquisition justified everything downstream of it. He forwarded the file to Diane, then to a journalist at the financial desk of a major national paper whose number he had held for 3 years without using. Then to the secure intake portal of the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, alongside a note that referenced the formal complaint Diane had filed that morning. Then he put his phone in his pocket and turned back to the room. Cross was checking Claire's pulse. His expression was focused. She was breathing steadily, eyes open, still watching the ceiling. The grip of whatever the compound was doing had been visible in her face for the last several minutes, the tightness, the shallow quality of her breath. But her eyes were clear. She was present. She was fighting it in the specific way she fought everything, without announcement, without display, through the sheer application of will to the business of continuing. How long? Nathaniel said. The compound needs 15 minutes to be neutralized by the treatment. We're at minute 6. Cross checked a monitor he'd attached to her finger. Oxygen sat is 94. It's going to drop a little more before it stabilizes. That's expected. And then it comes back up. Cross looked at him directly. She's going to be okay. The baby's going to be okay. But I need you to let me work. Nathaniel nodded, moved back to the doorway. His phone buzzed again. He looked at it. Hail. Victoria Beaumont is on the main staircase. She's heading toward the lobby level. I'm 2 minutes out. And then, immediately after, she has something in her hand. Looks like a phone. She's making a call. And then, wait. She stopped. Someone told her something. She looks. Nathaniel, she knows something went wrong. She's moving fast now, toward the exit. He typed back, don't let her leave the building. Hail. On it. Then the phone rang. Not a text. A call. His father. He stared at Douglas Ashcroft's name on the screen for 3 full seconds. The phone rang again. He answered. Nathaniel. His father's voice. Controlled, as always. But underneath the control there was something that had not been there in 50 years of boardrooms and calculated silences. Something cracked. What have you done? I think you know, Nathaniel said. The files, whoever you had access those systems, that's illegal entry, those records, are going to be very interesting to a federal financial crimes investigator, Nathaniel said. I imagine they'll have questions by morning. You have destroyed... His father stopped. Nathaniel could hear him breathing, could hear for the first time in memory something that was not performance or strategy in his father's voice. Just a man who had built his entire life on a structure that was coming apart. You have destroyed everything. You tried to kill her, Nathaniel said. His voice was very quiet. You sat in your house and you authorized a plan to murder the mother of your grandchild. I want you to understand that I know that. I want you to understand that every federal agency I sent those files to also knows it because it's in the communications. The emails between you and Harrison. I've read them. Silence. She's alive, Nathaniel said, in case that information matters to you. More silence. Then, Nathaniel, don't, he said. We're done. He ended the call, put the phone in his pocket, turned back to the room. Cross looked up. Oxygen sat 96, he said. She's responding. Nathaniel crossed the room in 4 steps and took Claire's hand, the one that wasn't attached to the monitor. She turned her head and looked at him. Her jaw was still tight, the compound still working through her system, but her eyes were fully present, that direct, unperformed steadiness. Even now, even here, the files went out, he said. All of them. Yes. She nodded, her hand tightened on his. Victoria, she said. Hale has her. Your father. He called. And it's done, he said. All of it. Everything I built for 5 years is in federal hands right now. By morning they'll have enough to move, she said. Not a question. Yes. She looked at him. The monitor beeped steadily, the oxygen number climbing in single digits toward something safer. Cross was at the supply cabinet, preparing the second phase of the protocol, moving with the unhurried efficiency of someone who was winning and knew it but wasn't finished yet. Our child is going to be okay, Claire said. Her voice was low. She was not asking this time either. She was saying it the way she said the things she had decided were true, without sentiment, without performance, with the specific weight of someone who has made a choice and intends to be right about it. Yes, he said. Her hand tightened again on his. Outside the medical room door, somewhere in the building, he could hear the sound of raised voices and the particular commotion of a large, expensive event, discovering that something had gone wrong. The sound of 500 people beginning to understand that the evening was not what it had appeared to be. And somewhere on that staircase, in a white dress, Victoria Beaumont was standing with Hale's team closing in on every side, holding a phone with no one left to call, in the specific silence of someone who has spent a lifetime believing in a plan that had just run out of room. Hale found her on the landing between the 2nd and 3rd floors, on the marble staircase that curved up from the main lobby in the particular architectural language of buildings designed to make people feel small and significant simultaneously. She was standing very still when he reached her, the 2 men she'd had with her already separated and detained by Hale's people on the lobby level below. She was alone on the landing with her phone in her hand and the white dress catching the light from the chandelier above, and she looked in that moment like something that had been constructed very carefully over a very long time and had just now, in this specific instant, stopped believing in its own construction. Hale identified himself. She didn't run. She didn't argue. She looked at him with the particular expression of someone who has spent years in a state of absolute certainty and is feeling, for the first time, the specific vertigo of its absence. She asked one question. Is she alive? Yes, Hale said. Victoria Beaumont looked at the wall for a moment. Then she sat down on the stair. Not dramatically, just sat, the white dress spreading around her, the phone in her lap, as if her legs had made a decision her mind hadn't caught up to yet. Call whoever you need to call, she said. Hale called. But the federal agents arrived at the Meridian Grand at 9:47 in the evening, which was 31 minutes after Diane's documentation had been formally received by the FBI Financial Crimes Unit's duty officer, and 22 minutes after the financial journalist had confirmed receipt of the full archive and begun making calls to her editors. By 10:15, the venue had been partially cordoned. The gala had dissolved into the specific chaos of 500 wealthy people being asked to remain available for questioning, and 2 agents were in the lobby speaking with Hale, while 2 more were on their way to the medical room. Nathaniel met them at the door. He had his attorney on the phone. He answered every question they asked and volunteered the documentation he had forwarded, and when they asked him to come to the field office for a formal statement, he said yes, tomorrow morning, with counsel present. And Diane said the same thing from the phone in his hand, and the agents accepted this because the documentation he had sent was substantial enough that they were In the particular language of law enforcement receiving an unexpected gift, more interested in what he knew than in him. Cross was still in the medical room when Nathaniel came back in. Claire was sitting up on the cot. The monitor was still on her finger. The oxygen number read 98. She looked at him when he came through the door, and he looked at her, and for a moment neither of them said anything. The room held the specific silence of two people who have just come through something that could have gone the other way. 98, she said. I see it. Ben says another 20 minutes on the monitor and then we can go. Okay. She looked at him more carefully. You've been talking to federal agents. Yes. And? Tomorrow morning, formal statement, Diane present. She nodded. Your father. They'll reach him tonight, I expect. The emails between him and Harrison are... He stopped, looked at the floor for a moment, then back at her. They're explicit. There's no reading them that doesn't arrive at the same conclusion. She was quiet, watching his face with the careful attention she gave to things that mattered. Are you okay? She said. I don't know yet. That's honest. Yeah. He sat down on the edge of the second cot. Cross was at the supply cabinet, doing the quiet administration of packing away what he'd used, giving them space without leaving. The room smelled like antiseptic and the faint residue of the ballroom, perfume and warm air and the ghost of an evening that had been designed as something else. Victoria is in federal custody, he said. Claire absorbed this. Her hand was on her stomach. She asked if I was alive. He looked up. Hale told you that. He texted me while you were in the hallway. She looked at the wall for a moment. She wanted to know if I was alive. Yes. That's... She stopped. I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything with it. I know, but I'm going to think about it. She looked back at him. She spent years believing she was owed something, believing the adults in her life had promised her a life and that I had taken it. That's not nothing. It's still monstrous. What she did is still monstrous, but it's not nothing. He looked at her. The woman who had just been poisoned at a charity gala by someone who hated her enough to purchase an experimental compound through 3 shell companies and plant an operative at her dinner table, and was lying on a medical cot thinking carefully about the psychology of the person who had done it. You're remarkable, he said. I'm processing, she said. Don't mistake it for virtue. She cross-turned from the cabinet. Oxygen sat's been stable at 98 for 10 minutes, he said. I want to keep the monitor on another 15, and then I want you in a real hospital for a full panel tonight. Not tomorrow, tonight. The baby, Claire said. The fetal heartbeat has been consistent on the monitor throughout. I want an OB to confirm that with proper equipment, but the numbers have been good. He looked at her directly. I believe you're both okay. I want that confirmed by someone with an ultrasound. She nodded. Then she looked at Nathaniel. Take me to the hospital, she said. Yes, he said. They were at the hospital until 2 in the morning. The OB on call was a woman in her 40s with the specific tiredness of someone who had been managing other people's emergencies for 20 years and had developed, as a result, the ability to be both thorough and calm simultaneously. She ran the panel. She ran the ultrasound. She asked Claire detailed questions about the compound, the timeline, the treatment Cross had administered, and Cross answered half of them himself from the chair in the corner where he had stationed himself. Still in his gala clothes, jacket off, sleeves rolled up. At 1:15 in the morning, the OB set down the ultrasound wand and looked at the screen and said, There's the heartbeat. She turned the screen so Claire could see it. Claire looked at it for a long time without speaking. The heartbeat on the monitor was small and fast and absolutely steady, the specific rhythm of something that had decided to continue. Nathaniel was standing beside the bed. He was looking at the screen and his hand was holding Claire's, and he was not speaking either. The room was very quiet. Strong, the OB said. Both of them. Cross exhaled from the corner chair, the specific sound of a man releasing something he had been holding for several hours. The morning came gray and cold, the particular quality of a New York winter dawn that makes no promises. Nathaniel had not gone home. He had not slept. He had sat in the chair beside Claire's hospital bed. They were keeping her overnight for observation, a formality at this point, but one Cross had insisted on, and the OB had agreed with, and watched her sleep, which she did finally around 3, her body claiming what it had been owed for the last several hours. He sat with his phone in his lap and watched the news move. By midnight, the financial story had broken in 2 outlets. By 2 in the morning, it had been picked up nationally. The documentation, the offshore structures, the federal complaint filed that morning, the arrest of Victoria Beaumont on charges of attempted murder and conspiracy, the federal agents who had arrived at the Meridian Grand mid-gala. By 4 o'clock, the markets in Asia were responding to the early reports. Ashcroft Holdings and Beaumont Global were hemorrhaging value in pre-market trading at a rate that told a very specific story about what institutional investors do when they understand that the criminal exposure of a company is not a rumor, but a documented federal complaint. His father called at 4:32 in the morning. He didn't answer. His mother called at 4:51. He didn't answer. Harrison Beaumont's number appeared at 5:15, an unknown call that he had identified through a separate channel. And he didn't answer that either. At 6 o'clock, Diane sent a message. Federal warrants issued for Douglas Ashcroft and Harrison Beaumont, both expected to surrender by 9 a.m. per counsel. Corporate accounts frozen pending investigation. The trust challenge has been formally withdrawn. Their attorneys called an hour ago. He read it twice. Then he put the phone in his jacket pocket and looked at Claire. She was still asleep. The hospital light was low and the room was warm, and her face in sleep had the specific quality of rest that arrives after something has been survived. Not peaceful, exactly, but settled, the expression of a body that has been through something and is doing the necessary work of recovering from it. Her hand was on her stomach, even in sleep, the same position. He looked at that for a while. She woke at 7. He was still in the chair. She looked at him and registered, without surprise, that he had been there all night. "You should have slept," she said. Her voice was morning rough. "Probably." "Did something happen overnight?" "Several things," he told her. Briefly, factually, the way she preferred. The arrests, the warrants, the market numbers, the trust challenge withdrawal. She listened with her eyes open and her hands folded on the blanket, the listening posture he knew. Fully present, processing at speed, not interrupting until he was done. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "It's over," she said. "Not a question, just the fact of it being named." "The legal process will run for years," he said. "There'll be testimony and proceedings, and I know that. I mean, the danger is over." "Yes," he said. "The danger is over." She looked at the window. The gray winter light was strengthening, the city beginning to be visible through the glass. Buildings, sky, the ambient motion of the world going about its business with no knowledge of the specific room they were in. "Your father is going to prison," she said. "Probably." "Yes." "Your mother?" Her exposure is less direct. She knew things. Whether that rises to criminal liability? Diane thinks probably not, on the financial charges. He paused. The other things, what she knew about the compound, about Victoria's plan, that's less clear. Claire nodded slowly. And the company, both companies. The foundation takes controlling interest as the transfers complete, which they do, as of this morning. The trust challenge is gone. He looked at his hands for a moment. "I haven't decided yet what to do with it all, the full structure." She looked at him. "You have an idea." "I have something I've been thinking about for a while." He met her eyes. "Your work, what you've spent 6 years building a case for, the out-of-network billing structures, the emergency care gaps, the secondary payer failures, the way people in actual hospital rooms get destroyed by systems that were designed to extract from them instead of treat them." He paused. "Ashcroft Holdings has the infrastructure, the capital, and the distribution relationships to change some of that. Not all of it, but some." She looked at him for a long time. He could see her processing it. Not the sentiment of it. She had no patience for sentiment, but the structure, the actual mechanism. Whether it was real or whether it was the kind of thing people said in hospital rooms at 7 in the morning after surviving something. "That's not a simple thing," she said. "You'd need people who understand the policy architecture, who know where the actual leverage points are." "I know someone," he said. She looked at him. "She's a healthcare policy analyst," he said. Brilliant, has opinions about everything, argues with precision and without deference. Recently cleared of a fabricated plagiarism allegation with 8 hours of forensic work. He held her gaze. She's also currently in a hospital bed, so the timing is maybe not ideal. She was quiet for a moment. Then the thing happened in her eyes. The precursor to the smile, before her mouth got there. I'm going to want full operational authority on the policy side, she said, obviously. And I'm going to disagree with you constantly. I'm counting on it. And we are going to have a very serious conversation about governance structure before I agree to anything, because I have watched too many good faith initiatives get absorbed into corporate frameworks and lose everything that made them worth building. We'll have that conversation. Today. When I'm out of this bed. Today, he said. She looked at him for another moment. Something moved through her expression. Not soft, not sentimental, but real. The specific warmth of someone who trusts what they're looking at. Come sit on the bed, she said. The chair looks terrible, and you've been in it all night. He moved to the edge of the bed. She shifted to make room, carefully, and he sat beside her, and she leaned her shoulder against his arm, and they looked at the window together, the light coming stronger now, the city doing what it always did. Moving, indifferent, continuous, 100,000 lives happening in parallel without knowledge of each other. I've been thinking about names, she said. He looked at her. Not asking you, just telling you I've been thinking about it. Okay. I want something that doesn't sound like it belongs to either of our families. That's a wide field. I know. Good. She was quiet for a moment. Something that just belongs to them. He looked at the window. The gray light had gone slightly warmer, the city catching the early angle of a winter sun that was finally making its argument. The hospital was beginning its morning, the sounds of it coming through the door, a cart in the hallway, low voices, the particular rhythm of a building that never fully slept resuming its day shift. Ben's going to want to check in this morning, he said. I know. And Diane needs me at her office by... I know, go. Do what you need to do. She said it without pulling away from where her shoulder rested against his arm. Come back when you're done. I'll be back by noon. Okay. He didn't move immediately. He sat for another minute, maybe two, in the specific quality of morning light in a hospital room that smells like antiseptic and the particular exhaustion of having come through something. And he thought about a rooftop bar in October and a woman who asked for less ice and had a notebook open on the bar and didn't narrow her eyes when he said his name. And he thought about a couch in Brooklyn and policy arguments and cheap coffee and a radiator that worked only intermittently. And he thought about 6 feet of pavement and a photograph in 72 hours and 40 minutes and a monitor reading 98 and a heartbeat on an ultrasound screen at 1:15 in the morning that was small and fast and absolutely steady. He thought about his father's voice at 4:30 in the morning, the thing underneath the control, the crack in it, and felt, not satisfaction, something more complicated than satisfaction. The specific weight of a door that has been closed and will not reopen, and the strange lightness of what comes after. He had destroyed 2 dynasties. Everything his family had spent generations building, gone, not burned in anger but dismantled methodically, turned over to systems that would process it according to laws it had spent decades pretending not to apply to it. He had done it deliberately and without hesitation, and he did not regret it. He was also aware, sitting in a hospital room in the early morning light, that the absence of regret was not the same as the absence of weight. Some things you did because they were necessary and right, and they cost what they cost, and you carried that without pretending it was light. The cost was real. He was going to carry it, but what he was carrying it toward was also real. He got up, found his jacket, looked back at her. She was watching him. The directness of it, that same look from a hotel rooftop, from a diner booth, from a Brooklyn doorway at 7 in the morning, from a marble staircase in every version of this story where he found her, unchanged, unperformed, present. Go, she said. I'll be here. He went to the door, stopped with his hand on the frame. Claire. Yeah. He turned back to look at her one more time. She was sitting up in the hospital bed in a gray gown with her notebook already open on the blanket beside her, because of course it was, because she was already working, already thinking, already building something careful and important out of evidence and argument and the belief that it could change something real. Her hair was down. There was a monitor still on her finger that she had not removed despite the night being over. Her other hand was where it always was. "Thank you," he said, "for not running." She looked at him with that steadiness, the thing he had recognized on a rooftop in October as something he had never encountered before and had spent every month since then trying to deserve. "Same," she said. He walked out. Down the hospital corridor, past the nurse's station, past the carts, and the morning shift, and all the ordinary machinery of a place built for emergencies. He went through the lobby and out through the glass doors and into the cold winter air of the city, which received him the way the city received everything, without ceremony, without judgment, simply as one more person moving through it. The sun was up now, all the way. The kind of thin winter light that made the buildings look cleanly cut against a sky that had gone from gray to a pale, sharp blue. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment and breathed it. Cold air, exhaust, the smell of coffee from somewhere nearby, the indifferent, beautiful noise of 8 million lives. Then he called Diane, and he started walking, and behind him in a hospital room on a floor above the street, a woman who had refused every opportunity to be erased sat with her notebook and her steady heartbeat and the smaller, faster heartbeat that had come through everything with her, and she wrote the first line of something new. She crossed it out, rewrote it, crossed it out again, got it right on the third try. She always did.